One. Hello and welcome to the Deciduous Bonsai podcast. I'm your host Andrew Robson, a bonsai professional in Portland, Oregon who specializes in deciduous trees, and I'm here with my friend, student, volunteer, colleague, and moderator on the bonsai subreddit, Maciek. Awesome. So today's topic, we are talking about the secrets behind healing wounds on deciduous trees quickly. And not just deciduous trees, pretty much everything that we're going to talk about applies to
everything.
Any bonsai that you have, but in the context of deciduous, we tend to do a lot of big cuts, and so we tend to have to deal with a lot of big wounds. So yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, I think I'll just start by saying that since starting to study here, I have gone from being kind of like really sort of unsure about wound healing and about the entire topic around it, pace and things like that, timing and all those things. And since then, it's just become like an ordinary, well-planned, well-executed, precise thing, very surgical, very clean. And sort of well understood. Like I don't fear it anymore, and I think there is a lot of fear around it.
It's kind of easy once you've seen it, done it a few times, and you kind of get the hang of it. But I mean, you've kind of been here in the garden since the very beginning, when in 2021, the first year that the garden was kind of going, if you came here and visited RAKUYO, you would see a lot of big stumps with big stubs on it. Yeah. That was probably 90% of the garden was like rough, very rough material, and now we've had 5 years or so of slowly transitioning things, getting all that roughness kind of worked out of these things. So I think it's safe to say that I've healed plenty of really, really big wounds here.
I think you've made the biggest cuts that I personally know of. Even with conifers, I would say you've made some of the biggest cuts I know of. So
yeah, so I have a lot of anecdotal data from this big garden experiment here.
Yep.
And
this town, also this region, is also a pretty good place to explore that topic. There's a lot of people in the area who have big material with big cuts and big wounds to heal. So there's a lot of this topic floating around.
That's right. I mean, I got over 70 trees from Telperion farms, and every single one of those was rough around the edges. And we've been trying to heal around the edges on those rough cuts. And so in this episode, we're going to cover kind of what we've learned over the past few years of healing big wounds, tips and tricks that you can do to kind of do some of those at home. So where should we start?
I think we should start we should lay the groundwork and say like what happens before the cut, because I think there are things that you need to think about before you do the big cuts to know whether you're ready to make that cut. Especially the flush cut where you'll finally be flat against something rather than leaving a stump or so on. Yeah,
I think I have a general rule of thumb. If you're cutting something big down to something small, then you have to leave a stub. If you're cutting something small on something big, then you can cut flush, assuming it's the right time of year. And the right time of year to cut flush is kind of during the active growing season, not during the dormant season. So if you're cutting a really, really big branch down to a little tiny thing, in this big in terms of diameter, then you need to leave a pretty healthy stub. If you don't leave a stub when you're doing something like that, then you can get dieback that goes all the way down the trunk and can compromise that little tiny twig that you're doing that big cut down to.
And I guess for any beginners that are joining us, it'd be good to mention that when we say we're cutting things for the purposes of getting ready to do wound healing and things like that, big cuts, we're always talking about lignified, woody stuff. We're never talking about fleshy green tissue. That's pinching.
That's pinching, yeah. So we're talking about big, solid things. We're cutting into the hard, lignified wood.
Right.
So if you're going something big down to something small, you have to leave a stub during the growing season. If you're going something small on something big, if I'm cutting a little tiny shoot on a really big established branch or trunk, then I can cut flush. And in both the cases, when we leave a stub or when we don't leave a stub, we still are gonna kind of treat those relatively similarly in terms of how we heal those things.
So the case where we're cutting something small on something big, is it kind of like the little thing, it's smaller than a Sharpie in terms of thickness, so it's smaller than my pinky in terms of thickness. And in your mind, are you sort of justifying that flush cut because that cut will kind of be surrounded by like an ocean of cambium that is
That's right.
growing really hard. And I don't know if an ocean is, it's like almost like a superhighway of cambium.
Superhighway, exactly. Right. Versus when we're going from something big down to something small, that highway doesn't yet exist. The tree needs to build that, AKA collar.
Right.
And so oftentimes when we're doing really big cuts, we need to leave stubs for a couple years, which is why we were talking about that the 70 trees that came here from Telperion. They had a lot of big cuts made down to little small things, and so they were just covered in stubs. Each tree probably had 15, 20 stubs on it in the garden, and over time we've worked away at chipping those back. Once those branches that were small down below gained some strength, some momentum, some size and caliper that was about at least half the size of where the cut was, that's when we were able to then take those stubs back a little bit later. Now, you might leave your stub on there for 1, 2, maybe even 3 or 4 years.
I was going to ask that, like how long do we wait for that collar?
Yeah, you need that little thing that you're cutting back to be at least half the size of the cut site. So if it's about half the size, that's a general rule of thumb for when it will naturally have collared, and then you can come in and make a nice angled cut. When we do big cuts and we cut back to something small, we always leave 1 or 2 inches, and we always just make the cut perpendicular. You never kind of cut at an angle or do anything like that. Always just make it perpendicular, leave that stub. The angle cut will be when you go to do the final cut that you do flush.
The flush cut.
Yeah, once that thing you're cutting back to is big enough.
Let's go back to just the collar for a second.
Yes.
And both in identifying it and seeing it and cultivating it. First, we should probably say, what is that collar? Because I think of it as like a wrinkly ridge that goes all the way around the base of whatever I'm going to be cutting off. So let's say I was cutting off my arm. Right at my shoulder, I would want to see a wrinkly ridge all the way around.
Yeah, you can often see it visually. You'll see a little bit of a bump or indentation there where the tree has naturally shifted that highway of moisture flow.
Do you ever find yourself waiting for the collar to be like especially enhanced, or is just the mere presence of any collar enough to like verify, okay, I've got that flow around that zone? The defensive like flow of cambium around that zone?
It doesn't have to look very severe. Oftentimes it can look very subtle, and sometimes you might not even see too much of it at all. So it doesn't. It's more about having the size of the thing that you're cutting back to have enough momentum and kind of power and caliper to it so that you can safely do the next cut.
Right. So if I'm like cutting, like let's say I have a Japanese maple from the nursery and it's just a Y.
Yeah.
And I wanted to cut one of the
Y things,
one of the Y ends off, you know. So, and they're exactly the same size. It's like a 1-inch trunk and a 1/2-inch Y each, you know. Then one of them is they're both the same size. They're both pretty comparable to the size of the trunk. I do have to like cut to a stump on one of those first.
Yeah, leave a 1-inch stub, and then in a year or two, then you can go back in and cut that stub back flush. The important part is what we do after we cut it back flush. So there's a couple things that we're going to talk about. The whole secret of this episode, I think, is going to be in the type of cut paste. But before we talk about cut paste, let's talk about making your flush cuts clean enough and concave enough. So the thing that a lot of people don't realize with cuts is that we tend to want to make as small of a cut as possible, which is a good kind of mindset to be in. We don't want to take a cut that could be 2 inches and make it 4 inches just for no reason at all. We don't want to have big scars.
It feels bad to take a huge amount of wood right off of a trunk.
It's terrible. Yeah, we're making a bigger wound. It's a bigger operation. But sometimes we have to do it because callus is always going to add mass. So if I don't make a pretty good concavity with my cut site, then the callus, if I just make a perfectly flat cut on the trunk, for example, then the callus is going to have a bump on it. And so I don't want to have bumpy, knobby looking trees. So I have to make a slight concavity, account for the mass that the callus is going to add so that it heals over, hopefully flat.
Yeah, one of the student mistakes that I've made, that I was initially making here, and I think you helped me get past it, was like in leaving what I would call maybe like a butte or a mesa, like a structure, like a table or a ledge or a plateau or something that's still above the smooth landscape that I would ultimately love to heal to. Yeah, I would love to leave no trace, but for me to leave no trace, I can't leave that that raised landscape.
You have to cut that away, which often involves is making your cut maybe 20, 30, maybe in some cases 50% bigger than you were going to, but you'll get a better kind of smoother healing over in the first place. So it's something to kind of keep in mind, and something that I didn't do enough on the early cuts, and I've since had to go back and recut some things in the early years. After healing hundreds of big wounds in this garden, I can tell you that, like, take the time to really do it right, cut deep enough. And the other thing is not just deep enough, but cut smooth too. The more bumpy your kind of cavity that you're leaving behind, the more kind of hurdles you're making for the callus that's going to grow over.
Right, because the callus would like to run across a really nice, smooth landscape.
Nice, smooth landscape.
Right.
So it's like you and a bike. Like if you're going to go up and downhill, you're going to go slower than if you just are going flat.
It's like a land rush. You know, there's a starting gun and you just want to run to the horizon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So making it really smooth, either, doing lots and lots and lots of little whittling type cuts with a knob cutter, or going in with a knife or a Dremel to really just polish it off nicely.
And be surgical, use really sharp tools, care for your tools, love your tools.
Yeah, and just be careful because you don't want to nick yourself in the process anyway. Right. But taking the time to really make the cuts deep enough or concave enough and then smooth enough can dramatically increase your healing.
Do you have any thoughts on the stump itself? Because sometimes by the time I've waited maybe a year for a collar, it's like the next June already. Yeah. And like my stump has like grown a bunch of shoots on it. Do I need to worry about like reducing that stump now?
Yeah, if your stump does try and resprout, oftentimes what I'll do is I'll just keep killing it off when I see them. So if I'm walking by watering and I see that stump has a few twigs that have sprouted off of it, I'll just come in, I'll just yank them off with my hand or go get a pruner and cut them off. So yeah, you can keep kind of encouraging the tree, or that might be a sign that maybe you left your stump slightly too long, and so maybe you cut it, a little bit, more south of where you did.
But the first if it grows a bit and it's got a couple shoots on it, like the year later when I'm ready to do flush cut day, I shouldn't be like, oh no, it's growing.
It's not a huge problem. But if it's sucking out a lot of energy, then maybe it didn't collar in the first place. But if it's just one or two, it shouldn't be a problem.
Now the opposite case is that the stump dies back a bit. Yeah. Towards the zone of future cut. Is that something you should be like scared of, or?
Not really. And when we go to do the second cut to clean up a lot of the big stubs that have been left, usually what happens is a lot of that wood is going to have been dyed back anyway, so it's a little easier to get in there and cut
spongy.
A lot of that back. A little spongy,
Right. Okay.
Now I recommend we're about to, I think, transition to cut paste.
Yeah, I think that about covers it for the before, right? Make sure to leave something to grow for a while. Be aware of collars and ridges and things like that.
Yep. And if you have any questions about this, you're always free to drop a note in the comment section, and we'll try and get back to you about that. But with cut paste now, I always cut paste no matter if it's a stub or if it's a flush cut. Because one of the benefits, and we'll talk about the many benefits of cut paste, but one of the benefits is cut paste keeps bad things out. It's going to keep disease, pathogen, and anything gross in the environment away from getting into that big wound.
Anything, I guess, that would be introduced by the flush cut day, that particular day.
That's right.
Right. But I guess also the stub cut as well the year before, it would help with that as well, right? So do you paste the end of your stubs as well?
I do paste the end of my stubs as well.
If they're big, I guess?
Yeah, just because, again, it's kind of adding a protective layer of keeping bad things out. It's almost a Band-Aid in a way, to just keep bad stuff out. And also, one of the bad things that it's keeping out is water. Now, water will always find a way to get in somehow, but it's going to block, if you totally cover a wound with cut paste, your cut paste is going to block water from just sitting on that wood and just rotting it faster than it needs to. And
so you might find rot in there, and that may be okay to a degree.
If you find rot in there, it's usually not from something that you did by leaving a stub for a couple of years.
Like
usually it's you bought a tree, someone didn't handle the tree correctly in the past. A bunch of wounds were untreated, a bunch of water got in, rotted those out. You have soft wood that's made kind of these big cavities in the tree. And if you're trying to do a more kind of perfect looking tree where it doesn't have a lot of scars or shari or anything like that, you hollow out all of that softwood. You fill it with either cement or epoxy like JB Weld.
Yeah, we've done that here on pretty big wounds before.
Yeah, I've probably put in basketball, maybe not basketball, at least like softball size cavities.
I think bigger than my fist for sure.
Yeah.
Size of cement.
And as long as you have a nice ring of green on top of that cavity, you can heal over it. Not this trident behind you, but one of the other big chunky tridents in the garden has a big softball cavity.
But some minor rot in the very middle of the grain that suggests, there might be a little bit of rot sort of weaving its way through the tree. Is that a big deal? Because I feel like
super minor. No, if you can like grab it with your finger and like dig it out, or especially like a tip of a scissors or something, then that's where I get all the softwood out, fill it with something really hard. Fill it with something really hard to heal over nicely.
Okay.
So, and again, I'm using Quickcrete from Home Depot, but you can use a JB Weld epoxy or some other things too.
Yeah. That's easy to get into a nice flat surface too.
Yeah. You can. It's easy because your cavity is kind of built in.
You can just tamp it out.
Exactly.
It's still wet.
Yeah. And you got your smooth surface. But and then the important thing is always cover your wound completely. This is a mistake that I see everywhere I go to travel and teach from so many different schools of bonsai.
What's the like thought behind not covering?
I have no idea. Like I see so many times people will take the perimeter of a wound and only put cut paste around the end. And the reason I think that's totally crazy and not a great idea is number one, we're not totally covering that wound. So again, water can get in the center of that wound and continue to rot it out. Number two, a lot of the cut pastes, as we're about to talk about, have beneficial things inside of them that stimulate callus growth and stimulate healing. And so
the callus is kind of moving and moving underneath that paste, and the paste is just waiting for it as it goes.
That's right. It's creating a kind of a microclimate around that cut where it keeps it really humid and conditions for the tree to callus well. It's very similar to a Band-Aid.
It strikes me as something that if you did that, and then that interior of that donut or whatever you want to call it, the inside, the unpasted circle that's inside of the stump, that you're kind of like leaving the future landscape of the callus rollover, you're leaving it open to, chaos.
Yeah, so I highly recommend covering the entire wound. And let's get into it now. I think my secret sauce for healing cut paste here is using the right cut paste, because there's a lot of different cut pastes on the market. I've used all of them here in the garden, and I've seen all of them in the thousands of trees I work on every year. And the one thing that I think is really, really important to do is use a beneficial cut paste. And it's hard to tell what's beneficial because unless you're someone like me who's done this 1,000 times in 1,000 different cases with all the different cut paste brands, you're not going to see the anecdotal results. But I can kind of testify from my experience that the Kirikuchi Nauru, Kirikuchi is a olive green colored cut paste, comes in this little tiny, looks like a little glue bottle type thing. And I get it from Jonas at Bonsai Tonight. There's a link to the cut paste down in the description of the video. My teacher, Michael Hegedorn, turned me onto this. It's a relatively new product. Actually, one of Daisaku Nomoto's students, I think, made this company. But it's a relatively new cut paste. It's only been around the last 10 years or so, but I've never seen a wound heal as quickly as it does when I use this cut paste.
It's got a nice color too.
It's got a nice color. It kind of blends in too. The one thing that I hear people say is it leaves a really hard surface behind, but in the grand scheme of things, that hard surface eventually flakes off. So in 3 to 5 years, that's going to get out of there. In the meantime, that hard surface underneath it, you're getting some of the best healing power that I've ever seen on the cut paste. So again, I get it from Jonas at Bonsai Tonight. That's where I get all of my supplies, and shout out to Jonas for carrying really, really great product. But yeah, if you click the link down in the video description, you'll see kind of where I get this cut paste. Not a lot of people carry it, so go give Jonas a shout out.
How do you compare this one to the solid Kirikuchi? Because there's that sort of like, I don't know what to call it, but it's almost like a Play-Doh, gray Play-Doh.
Yeah, so this brand does make the Play-Doh putty version and the liquid glue kind of version. I use and have both of them. I think both of them are great. I don't think there's a huge difference between a paste versus a putty. I think it's more important what product you're using versus what form of the product you use. Usually I use the liquid cut paste on relatively smaller stuff, and usually I use the putty on super big stuff.
Yeah.
But
If you have any conifers in your garden and have big wounds,
yeah, super big wounds,
might be
then
nice to just slap it on. And
yeah, but you know, honestly, either of these heal wounds super fast, better than anything else I've seen. Sometimes what I've done if I have a super big wound is I'll put a fine layer of this on as a base, and then I'll put the putty over it, kind of just to create that kind of humid environment for the wound to grow. But again, I've healed things that people have told me are not healable with this. Like there's a myth in the bonsai world that you cannot heal ginkgos. Ginkgos are unhealable.
Oh, I think I've heard that one actually.
Yeah, it gets floated around a lot. And generally with most other cut paste, that's true.
Is there anything unhealable in deciduous, do you think?
Not that I've encountered. Ginkgo and wisteria were the two ones that everyone says you can't do. Well, I've healed 3 to 5 inch wounds on ginkgo and wisteria with this cut paste.
Right.
So
now, I guess it's still what we said earlier was true too, right? It was very expert handling. If you hear somebody saying, "Oh, it doesn't work, you can't heal those," maybe they didn't do the before the cut things properly as well, right? And then they're like skewering the kirikuchi. I was almost going to say kirikuchi sauce.
yeah,
they're skewering the sauce and saying, "Oh, it's the kirikuchi doesn't work."
Yeah,
it does work. What do you think of things like the orange paste, the top gin?
Yeah, I've used top gin in the past. I've used high-low in the past. Again, I've never seen something as good as kirikuchi, and I've started talking to colleagues like Todd Schlafer's been really turned on by kirikuchi. He's on conifer yamadori. He's getting amazing results using this cut paste. Daisaku, one of the best shohin bonsai professionals from Japan, uses this on black pines and heals beautifully.
I've used this at John's as well. John Eads' farm. Yeah,
it's like honestly, Michael Hagedorn uses it for chochibai, which is another kind of notorious one for bad healing. This will heal wounds, so it heals the things that don't heal well. There's probably what makes it special is there's probably a lot of gibberellic acid in here, and like a lot of it compared to some of the other cut paste brands.
Like a therapeutic dose.
Yeah, but it's just like I use it because it works the best. It's anecdotally I've never seen something work so well, and so when I'm painting stuff on wounds, this is what I'm gonna grab for.
So if I can't reach Jonas, if I'm in Europe or somewhere and watching this episode, and my shop only carries one of these other ones, they're probably
I think the second best one is high-low. It's this kind of purpley kind of colored one here. This is my second favorite one. You can also get it from Jonas at Bonsai Tonight. And this one's very, very popular in the putty version. This is the liquid.
Nice color for like a ficus or something, right?
Yeah, it kind of has that grayish
kind
of purple hint to it that heals very lightly. But using these two side by side, which I've done a lot, the kirikuchi will heal wounds about twice as quickly as this one.
Oh, interesting.
So the kirikuchi.
I guess that speaks somewhat to their hormone content. Do you want to talk a bit about like the relative? First of all, do you waste time thinking about? Do you spend time thinking about whether there is this kind of hormone or that kind of hormone, or do you just like this is my universal choice, or is this too strong for any cases you can think of?
Yeah, I don't spend too much time thinking about it just because visually I see the results, so I don't really care the mechanism behind the results.
Are you modulating your dose via like the amount?
So because this does heal wounds really strongly, if you use it on a plant like a maple or a beech, which calluses incredibly well by themselves, then you might be pouring gasoline on the fire, and you could end up with a really big callus. However, if you take that, rather than just kind of goop this on in very liberal amount and put a lot of product on the wound, if you take a paintbrush and you paint a really fine layer, you're still going to get a beneficial cut paste that will heal a wound well, but by having it'll less of that hormone on there, it's going to create a less aggressive wound.
Yeah, the paintbrush method looks really pretty too.
Yeah, you don't tend to have it dripping down the trunk. You have a little bit more control. So yeah, I use on harder species to heal like ginkgo, wisteria, chochibai. I will just very liberally apply this. On easy species to heal like maples, beeches, elms, I will very conservatively apply this via paintbrush. So, and with both those applications, again, this just heals wounds the quickest and the most beautifully. So I really like this product. I can't say, I'm raving about it so much because I've just seen it work way better than anything else. There's like not even a close second. So I honestly, if I had other cut paste, I'd just throw them in the trash because this is like such a good
I'm not
product.
throwing my big blob of Kirikuchi or putty in the trash.
Or
that's for sure.
or use kind of other cut paste on stubs, because a stub we're not necessarily trying to heal over. We're just trying to keep moisture and some bad things out.
Yeah, I guess you could even use like glue on the
Honestly,
stub.
like this is basically just Elmer's glue with like some fungicide and some hormone in it. So for a stub, you could use Elmer's glue because we don't necessarily need callus on a stub. But for whenever you're making a flush cut, I would have a hard time using anything but the Kirikuchi.
So we're talking about the day of application or the moment of application, we're putting it on. One
Yes.
thing I've noticed sometimes is that I'll get quite a bit of fierce liquid exit out of the wound.
Yeah, depending on the
do you
species or the time of year, like a ficus, when we do a big cut on a ficus, it's going to push out all that latexy white
the
stuff.
yeah.
And so usually I'll wait for that to stop. You can even kind of slow it down by spraying some water on it. And then once it's kind of dried up, then you can come back in and put this on.
Is there some amount of time after which like the apples turn brown and you
I
wouldn't
do it
wanna-
within 24 hours.
Oh, 24 hours. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
so-
that's not too bad at all.
Yeah, not too bad. Obviously, the sooner the better, but within 24 hours is going to be fine. So yeah, or if like you're pruning for some reason in the dormant season and the trees are bleeding a little bit, then you can certainly wait for those to stop and then put this on after.
So something I have seen at another garden that I've studied at, Michael Hagedorn's garden, is sterilization of wounds. What do you think of sterilization? Is it even necessary given that this has some antifungal properties, or
I don't do a lot of sterilization here. I don't do it prophylactically, like what Michael's was doing when I studied
what
there.
we're talking about is like we've made the flush cut, we've razor cut everything, we're almost ready to put the paste on, but before we do, we go spritz with some isopropyl alcohol.
Yeah, either isopropyl alcohol or hydrogen peroxide, something that, or even xerotol, something to sterilize the wound. I don't do that here because I don't have crazy fungal problems. And now, if I had a lot of fungal issues in the yard, in the garden, then I would absolutely sterilize before applying the cut paste. But because everything is relatively healthy here, I just do my cut and then put this on right after.
Yeah, I guess it makes sense. Some of the stuff that we've cut over at Michael Hagedorn's is a little bit more proximate to a water feature. It's a bit more humid.
Yeah, he was having a big issue with some fire blight on chochabai, so like sterilizing those made sense. But yeah, and that was years ago when I was studying there. But yeah, I think if you don't have a problem, this is probably just enough to do. And that's keeping kind of your tools in pretty tidy shape too. Sterilizing tools every now and then, at least at the end of the day, is always a good idea.
Yeah, you should be giving your tools a lot of love anyway, because man, do they work really well when you keep them sharp and clean.
That's right.
Like every time, rather than having loads and loads of resin.
Yeah.
I may be guilty of that sometimes.
Yeah, I am too. I mean, it's tough here because, this morning you and I were working on trees in the garden. How many trees did we cut back? 30 trees?
Yeah,
maybe.
Like a couple dozen. Yeah.
So it's hard to spritz them down in between each one. But usually, if you have relatively low issues in the garden, that's lower of a priority to worry about.
But not something that we'd recommend against or say, oh, don't do that.
Right, no, it's a good practice to be in for sure.
Okay.
But yeah, use this cut paste, and again, really important to not just cover the perimeter of a wound, but cover the entire thing. Even if that wound is 5 inches across, I put cut paste over the entire thing. I don't just make a little ring of green circle around the edge, put it all the way across, because that's going to encourage your callus as it kind of chews up that hormone to keep going. It's going to prevent water from rapidly rotting the big wound that you've left behind. And it's just going to create a more kind of humid environment for rapid wound healing.
Okay, so we still have a bit to talk about in terms of what happens after.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, I just wanted to sort of also talk about alternatives and maybe some misconceptions. So first of all, there is some folklore on the internet around like pastes and putties doing nothing.
Folklore on the internet? What?
Yeah. There's some. Sometimes this comes up that it's been disproven that it doesn't work, and I think maybe there's some crosstalk between like what we do in bonsai versus what we do for big full-size trees. I don't know if that's the case, but it seems like sealants are not always believed in.
You know, I'm not an arborist. I don't know a lot about that world, but what I do know is that bonsai is a very unique thing. And just because something happens with a big tree does not mean that those things apply once we get in a bonsai pot and really scale things down. And so the soils that we use, radically different than what trees are growing in.
Hydroponic almost.
Yeah. And so, and that's just one part of it. So with wound healing, you know, there's a lot of talk about how arborists make cuts. I really don't care because
your goal is aesthetic too, right?
Yeah, our goal is healing wounds quickly. If that's the goal, then if you want to heal your wound quickly and beautifully, then there's, I think, a way to do that, and there's a way to do that well, and there's a way to do it not well. And I've fixed a lot of trees in my bonsai career. I probably work on 1,000 different trees a year on all my travels, plus a few hundred trees that we have here. And I've seen a lot of anecdotal evidence where using cut paste, especially this cut paste, because I have students all around the country using this in different locations on different species, and this blanket across the board just heals things really, really well. My students who are using it are seeing it, and if you've used it, I'd encourage you to drop a note in the comment section because I'm curious what your thoughts are too. But
it's funny to sometimes see how this stuff. What it looks like when a stump takes really well to it.
Yeah,
and then the stump.
You can often see a stub.
The stump starts curling over top and healing itself. And I've seen on big leaf maple, I've seen it just outright just grow more wood upwards, which is just crazy to see.
It's crazy, but it really does work. And on the thousands of trees that I encounter a year, the ones that don't have cut paste, and especially haven't had cut paste for a long time, are the ones that create all these big nasty hollows and cavities in the trees that we then have to spend a lot of labor filling with cement and kind of fixing, or even maybe it ruins the tree as half the trunk rots down.
And then maybe pathogens become an issue.
Yeah, the tree's in a very different state than the perfect tree that it started out as. So to all of that internet stuff that I read and see a lot, I think it's coming from people who don't have that anecdotal experience that I do, that haven't seen the thousands of different examples of this kind of work and not work.
Right.
And with the trees that I see on a daily basis professionally, I would absolutely use cut paste. I would absolutely use this cut paste. And I would absolutely cover the entire thing.
One thing, and this feels like a little bit of a non sequitur, but I feel like Japanese professionals have a very, very strong sense of frugality and not spending any more money or effort than they need to on any single detail.
Super frugal.
I think that they are a really good weather vane for whether something is BS or not.
Yeah.
And so I just don't feel that Daisaku Nomoto would use this if it didn't do anything, and especially he wouldn't spend money on it because he's very, very efficient with his.
You're absolutely right. Like even American professionals, I don't make a ton of money. I'm not going to just buy 10 bottles of this a year if I don't see an improvement.
Yeah, but it's an imported thing, right?
It's a very important thing for healing wounds quickly and beautifully. So there's a few other things that people have played around with in regards to healing wounds. Sometimes people will put aluminum foil over that, and sometimes people will actually wrap grafting tape or something around
Bloody
it.
tape.
The aluminum foil thing, I think, is like a way to maybe increase heat a little bit and again, kind of create a little bit of a microclimate for that wound to heal in more favorable conditions.
It is a sort of sealant, I guess, but not perfectly impermeable.
But I found just using a good enough layer of this kind of does that same effect. So the kind of hardness that this creates on top kind of creates that kind of foil layer.
There is a kind of yuckiness, ultimately, even if you have a workshop fetish and you like to see lots of trees with wire on them and everything looking very much in progress. There's a kind of yuckiness to having aluminum foil kind of sticking. Like somebody visits your garden, you're like, what's going on over there? And you're like, well, I'm healing in a special way. Meanwhile, you're like camouflaged almost, right?
It is camouflage.
Yeah.
It's really nice, and I think it kind of does what the aluminum foil does. So I don't use it personally. I haven't experimented enough with hundreds of examples, but what I've seen anecdotally is this will heal a wound just fine without having to put aluminum foil on.
Right.
The other thing that people use, like we said, is using some type of grafting tape or buddy tape to help kind of press a callus in flat. It's really not an issue to get a callus to go flat if you're making enough of a concavity and applying the right amount of this product. So yes, if you make a convex cut and you put a lot of kirikuchi on, you're going to have a bump of a callus because your cut's already kind of convex anyway.
I guess your callus will like. Will it actually climb over that bump? It just
adds mass. Yeah, okay. It will eventually climb over that bump. So you just make a bigger bump by not making a concavity.
I've always understood that we want that flat so that it rolls really quickly, but I've never thought, if somebody actually made a bump on purpose, like does it still? Could somebody make a knee?
It still will kind of go over that.
Could somebody make a knee on a bald cypress this way, like a synthetic knee?
Maybe.
Like make a knee out of cement and then have the callus roll over.
Yeah, you theoretically could. But in most cases, we don't want that.
Right,
and so again, like I don't think there's a need to wrap around the callus because if you do the cut correctly in the first place, if you do the setup well.
Right, the collar. Yeah,
that's right. Then this will kind of work just fine.
I guess we should actually talk one more second about that, which is on flush cut day, on most deciduous, it's very easy to go in with a very sharp little tool, a razor or something, and actually find the boundary of the green.
Yeah, and you want to see the ring of green all the way around the cut, 360 degrees
And if
around.
you found it all the way around, then there's no mystery of whether you haven't gone far enough, or you have gone far enough,
right.
or is this brown over here and it's rotted? No, it's all live all the way around. So now all that's standing between you
and then inside that ring of green that you've made, you want it to be concave in that line.
And at that point, there's nothing between you and healing that wound.
That's right.
Other than just time and vigor in the tree around.
Yeah, the tricky thing is sometimes the wound or whatnot has died because it hasn't been done well, has died back farther than expected. And so where you expect that green ring might not actually be the reality. You might have to
keep searching.
dig a lot deeper and make that wound a lot bigger to actually find it. But you do need to expose that ring of green cambium all the way around and seal it with the cut paste so that it really starts actively stimulating that callus from the start.
So that segues pretty nicely into kind of what life is like in the months or even years after we've done the flush cut. So we spent a year maybe getting the stump to prepare the collar. Now we flush cut. We did a very precise thing. We sealed it. A few months later, we actually see a bit of wrinkling or ruffling of the actual sealant itself, which shows that callus is moving inwards. And then eventually, maybe it stalls or maybe it heals up. That's kind of
most of the time it's going to stall.
Right.
9
Stalling
out of 10
is okay.
times,
Stalling is normal, you're saying?
Stalling is normal. That's just kind of what a tree does. It will start healing really, really quickly for the first kind of 30-40% of it. And then after that point, it's going to look like that callus isn't doing anything.
Right.
And so it's kind of like a car battery. Yeah, it's kind of like a car battery that you left your light on and it's now the juice has run out. Right. So it's time to jumpstart that battery. And the way that we jumpstart a stalled callus is we take I use a dental pick, which you can also buy from Jonas at Bonsai Tonight.
Oh yeah, he's got some really nice.
He's got a really nice little pick for this purpose because it's got a little blade that's wide enough to make it. But you just need to make a sliver of green on the inside of where that callus.
Like sub millimeter. Like,
just a millimeter or so. On the perimeter of where that callus has stopped and stalled out, make a ring of green all the way around there. Again, you need it 360 degrees all the way around.
That sounds a little bit like flush cut day, where we're once again finding the live
exactly
edge.
Like flush cut day.
Right.
The thing is, we don't want to do too big of a green kind of exposure because we don't want to take away what we've already spent time healing.
Right. So we're hoping that we've actually advanced by some distance before.
Yeah, at least 30-40%.
Right.
And then we take that little metal pick. This is usually kind of the following growing season. So we make it the cut in let's say growing season 0. growing season 1 and growing season 2, those are times that we're probably going to re-agitate that callus, especially if it's a big cut. If it's a small cut, if it's kind of finger size or smaller, you're probably going to get the healing done in all in one go. But if it's a cut that's 3, 4, 5 inches in diameter, that's a cut that's probably going to stall out a couple times, so you're going to need to re-agitate it, re-stimulate it, jumpstart that callus to get it to grow.
So much like the rest of bonsai.
Bonsai is action.
It's action.
Yeah.
And it's iterative.
And that's how you get it to heal quickly. If you're just sitting there watching it, you're going to have a very relaxing, low pace, slow hobby. But if you're willing to put in the work, you can heal that wound probably 3 times faster than if you just sit and wait.
Is there any relative... is there any thinking in your mind of like, oh, maybe I'll wait a year to re-agitate because because I'm just really trying to have scarless or anything like that?
I'd say as long as you've seen about 30% progress, like as long as that callus has made quite a bit of headway, then you're okay to re-agitate it. If the callus has only grown like 2 millimeters all the way around, then that's not enough to really go in there and dive and re-agitate it. So if it's close 30, 40%, that's when we go and take that dental pick from Jonas and just re-agitate it all the way around. Now, after we do that, we always put on fresh cut paste because we have that fresh wound again.
Fresh dose of hormones. And
fresh dose of hormones to get right in contact with that new wound. And then again, I take the time to not just do it around the perimeter where I've made my little ring of green, but all the way across.
Right. And by then, you should ideally have something that's smaller than what you started with.
That's right. And usually a big wound will take 1 or 2 times to really jumpstart and get it rolling. So
kind of a zoomed out, bigger context. I've sort of gone through bonsai thinking, well, if you really want a scar-free tree, a scarless trunk, you've got to be clipping growing from very early position. And can people hope for scar-free trunks if they do everything, with professional precision?
Scar-free trunks are a fantasy. There's always going to be scars. Now,
are scars a problem?
On certain species, they can be. So on a beach, you don't want big scars in the front where it's going to be exposed for 50 years past the healing.
So it's inevitable with some
But if it's
species.
on the backside, if it's on the upper part of the tree, if it's small versus ginormous, then it's not as much of an issue. So again, I am in the camp, less scars are better than more.
Of course.
But don't let that kind of fear-monger you into this reality that doesn't exist. Every bonsai in my garden is going to have a wound on it somewhere if it's tapered. If the trunk has really almost no taper, then you're not going to see a lot of scar.
Yeah, if you dedicate yourself to removing every flaw you can as often as you can, then you raise the possibility that tree is still around 150 years after you died. And maybe, maybe that scar is gone, even on that beach. Right? Maybe.
It's possible. So now things like a trident can or anything that exfoliates can actually heal scars quite well. So for things like trident, stewartia, Chinese quince, we don't really worry about big scars because...
And obviously for things like Chinese elm or cottonwood or things like
that.
Barky
things will do just fine. Even Arakawa maple heals over just fine. You almost never know it's there. So it's really for the smooth bark, light colored bark trees like Japanese maple, beech that we're a little bit more sensitive to that. But generally speaking, the heavily tapered, the more heavily tapered the trunk is, like this trident behind us here has a super massively tapered trunk. It's got a lot of scars. The more tapered the trunk is, the more scars you're going to have on your tree. The more delicate and elegant your tree is, the less scars you're probably going to have.
That does seem like a likely trade-off.
Just because when we make something like this, it's a lot of growing out, cutting back. This tree was grown in the ground for most of its life, and so it has a lot of that kind of scarring history. And so that's what kind of spawned this idea for the podcast is we're about to work on all the wounds on this tree, take our dental pick, re-agitate all those wounds that have been done in the past, clean up a bunch of the wounds that we made today when we defoliated and wired this thing, and
full steam ahead.
Yeah, full steam ahead.
It's healable.
It is healable. Healing wounds, if you do the right thing in the right way, can be incredibly easy to heal and quick to heal. I think there's this misconception that like a 4-inch wound will take an eternity to heal on a tree. That's really not the case if you're doing it the right way. I hope this episode kind of helps everybody kind of do that in a better way. Probably, like you said, coming to an intensive class is probably the best way, where you have someone standing over your shoulder saying, no, you still need to go 10, 20% deeper in this initial cut.
Do whatever you can to take a look at how deep professionals will cut in before they're like happy with it.
We tend to be a lot less shy with our cutting. But yeah, and so that can be really, really helpful. We do a lot in my summer class this year. We do a lot of wound work because I still have a lot of kind of new chunky trees like this in the garden. And we are about to announce dates for next year's intensives here by the end of the month. So if you're interested in signing up for a class, stay tuned to the RAKUYO website for that. Usually Maciek is here volunteering during some of those, so you might get to meet him. But yeah, it's really, really important to take the time to do this right. It's not a hard thing, but once you kind of figure out the way to do it, healing wounds does not have to be a scary, impossible thing.
Yeah, embrace healing.
Embrace healing.
And if you're willing to refine branching over several years, then this should be no problem for you at all. It's just like that.
That's right. Now, the last thing that we could probably talk about is a way to also assist wound healing is to have more vigor in the tree. So if you have a sacrifice branch on your tree, or if you have a really strong branch next to the wound,
like right next to the wound?
Like right next to the wound, that can speed up healing as well. So
always be thinking of the highway of flow next to that wound.
And so if you have really big wounds to heal, it might be a case to not be in refinement stage for your tree yet, to have a lot of, have a few selected sacrifice branches running. Maybe every primary branch has a runner. A tree that has 5 or 6 or 10 long whips extending really strongly is going to heal wounds a lot more quickly than a tree that's perfectly pinched and manicured and doesn't have a single kind of growth tip on it.
So know the stage you're in, and if you need vigor, grant it to the
like
tree.
the tree behind us here, it has a lot of big wounds. So taking some time to really grow out some primary branches, like what we did today, was wire a lot of those in place, and now we're going to let it rip, basically. And so, that length that we're going to really put into every branch that we wired is going to help heal all those little wounds that are kind of stuck behind it. So if you're trying to heal wounds, especially really big wounds, let your tree run. That will really increase the healing process. And the time that you tend to get a lot of healing is kind of right now. We're filming this episode in kind of mid-August.
August 19th.
August 19th. Yeah. And so in this time range is a really good time. If you're watching this, go outside and you can re-agitate any stalled wounds that you have. Order some cut paste from Jonas at Bonsai Tonight and get the Kirikuchi Nauru. Paint that on, or use the putty version, put that on. Because right now, in the next kind of rest of August, all of September, that's when the cambium layer is kind of the most active, I've noticed, on the trees. That's where if you have wire on any of your trees, now's a good time to go take that off, or put eyeballs on it, because anything that's wired is going to be swelling really strongly at this point. But that swelling is a sign that the cambium's active, and this is a good time to be working on any wounds. Even if it's starting to get a little late in the year to cut your trees back, you can get in front of your tree, cut off any dead stubs. We always do this thing here called destubifying, where any little tiny stubs that have been done from scissor cuts in the past get cleaned up.
And we will generate wounds when we're destubifying, and we will paste those as well.
Usually, if it's big enough to see kind of from the naked eye across the room, it's big enough to put cut paste on. If like it's smaller than like a pencil, then stuff like that I tend not to really cut.
I'm just talking because this is a pretty chunky tree behind us, so we've been taking off some big stumps. Yeah,
so if you're cutting off finger-sized branches, then definitely cover those. But yeah, it's kind of like if you cut yourself, like if I just get a little scratch on me, I probably don't need to get stitches and don't need antibiotics and whatnot. But if I really cut myself, then okay, I should take an antibiotic just to be safe. Let's go to the doctor and get stitches. Kind of same thing for cut paste. If it's a little tiny cut, not really that important, but the bigger the cut, the more important it is to get it sealed up with this good stuff. So did we pretty much cover everything?
I think so.
If you have any questions about something we didn't cover that we missed, or any experiences that you'd like to share, feel free to drop a note in the comment section. yeah, you've been watching RAKUYO's Deciduous Bonsai channel. Hope you can take these tips and tricks and apply them to your bonsai practice at home. If you haven't already, hit that bell icon. Subscribing to the channel really shows us that this is worthwhile to do, and keep creating more episodes. And hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed today's topic. I'm Andrew.
I'm Maciek.
And we will see you guys next episode.